In today's episode, force me to take a useless sports physical? I'll make sure I fail it. They're all the same, just grab me one. Wife not eligible for a replacement phone for another year. Okay, but I am. So let's get started. Force me to take a useless sports physical? I'll make sure I fail it. Some background. In high school, I went to an academic magnet school. Essentially, it was a public school ran like a private school. You had to have certain test scores to get, no bus transportation, since it was for the whole county, way stricter dress code than all the other schools on the district, and they were able to have a ton of extra rules because it was a choice school. Now I was the first graduating class. I was there the first year it opened. At that time it was 5th to 9th grade, and I started as a freshman. The second year they had completed the elementary wing, and so it was K-10. They added grades until my senior year when it was finally K-12. As the school grew, it continued to add more policies. My sophomore year, the school's second year of being open, they began a new policy where all students 7th grade and above had to be on a sports team everywhere. I thought this was really stupid. I hated it. I'm not an athlete, I was in other clubs, and I was getting increasingly involved with my church. Being the mature 16-year-old I was, my initial plan was to join a team and have a bad attitude. Like an awful, evangelistically bad attitude so that no one would have any fun, and this would prove to the school how awful this rule was. Instead, for all the lazy kids like me, they started a school walking team. It wasn't power walking, just regular walking. We just had to walk around the neighborhood for about 45 minutes 3x a week after school. I was fine with this, I didn't mind walking around. Of course there was an adult coach, but since the whole thing was ridiculous anyways, my friend and I declared ourselves co-captains. This mostly consisted in telling the middle schoolers to walk faster. No one else considered us co-captains, but we did, and that's all that mattered to us since it was all a joke anyways. I did that my sophomore and junior years, but fast forward to my senior year. I was 18, working part-time about 15 to 20 hours a week. I was super involved in my church, and my family was a chaotic mess of dysfunction that traumatized me in numerous ways. They finally enforced the state law that everyone on a sports team has to have an annual physical on file. I didn't really bother with this since it wasn't a real sport anyways. Eventually, they came to me and said that it was so late in the season that even if I got a physical, I would need to pick a different sport in the winter or spring. Walking team was a fall sport. I was essentially just screw this, I had enough other things in my life to deal with, and I didn't want to put up with this crap anymore. I decided to do exactly what they say and get the physical. I also decided I would do my best to fail it. So eventually I went and saw a doctor. It's important to note that I didn't have a primary care doctor at the time, that's why I didn't get a physical before then. So I just went to some little walk-in clinic, and I tell them I need a sports physical. I didn't tell them what the sport was. Now as I was filling out the patient history form, I answered truthfully. I did not lie, but I didn't provide any context. So I checked yes to a history of asthma, mostly from when I was a kid, severe seasonal allergies, and a history of seizures. See, when I was 13 I had a couple dozen seizures in a day or two. No one knew what was going on, and eventually I was diagnosed with epilepsy, specifically having absence seizures. Since then, I had been taking anticonvulsants every day. As far as I am aware, even 20 years after that initial episode, I'm not sure I've had a full-blown seizure since then. It's literally the mildest case of epilepsy I've ever heard of. The doctor does a quick physical exam, mostly vitals and similar things. As she looks at my patient history form, she asks about the seizures. I explain that I was diagnosed with epilepsy, I take anticonvulsants, and I have a neurologist I see about once or twice a year. She says, well, I can't pass you until I hear from your neurologist. I basically hopped out of the chair, happily said thank you and walked out. I never did contact the neurologist. Instead, I just gave the paperwork to the school. And that's how I, a relatively healthy 18-year-old, got medically disqualified from the school walking team. They're all the same, just grab me one. I'm a parts manager at a dealership that sells, among other things, parts for small engines. Think mowers, generators, snowblowers, etc. When customers come into the store looking for parts for small engines, we almost always need a model and serial number of the engine in order to look up the correct fiche to get them the correct part. August 10th times the customer does not have this information, or they have the wrong information, i.e. the model of the mower, not the engine. Obviously we'll try to help the customer to avoid them having to leave to get the info and then come back. We'll ask if they bought the equipment from us, or if it had been in for service, then the model might be in our system. Sometimes we're able to ask enough questions and get enough details to be able to make a good guess as to the part they need. Sometimes there is nothing we can do and the customer has to go back to get the model number. When you ask for the model and serial number, most of the customers are understanding, but sometimes they utter the worst 5 words you can say to a parts person. Why? They're all the same. That's what Phil decided to do. Phil, a 50-year-old, chip on his shoulder, contractor type, storms up to the counter and says he needs a carburetor for a water pump. Do you have the model and serial number? Phil huffs, why, they're all the same. I start to reply, no, sir, they are not all dash. He then starts to raise his voice, just short of yelling, and tells me he needs a carburetor. They're all the same, the job he's on is shut down until he gets this equipment fixed. I ask if the equipment had been here before. It hadn't. I explained to him that they're not all the same, there are thousands of different carburetors, and that he'll have more downtime if we get him the wrong part. He's not having any of it. He turns beet red and finally breaks and yells at me. Just grab me AF * King Carb. You got it. I tell him I'll be right back. I go into the parts room, to the very back corner, where we keep old obsolete stock that's been there years, and I pick a very particular carburetor. This carburetor had been misordered a few years back, it fits one very particular engine, a very old engine, and because of that fact it was the most expensive small engine carburetor we had. Most carburetors for small engines run $25 to $125. This puppy retails for $299.99 and had been an eyesore on my inventory numbers for quite a while. I bring it out to the counter and tell him the price. He scoffs and hands me his card. I explain our return policy on fuel-related items. They cannot be returned if fuel touches them. He doesn't really pay attention, pays for it, and leaves. 2 hours later, one of my coworkers grabs me from the back and says a customer is asking for the manager. I ask what's going on. Coworker explains that a customer is upset because he can't return a carb because there's fuel in it. I smile because I know who it is. I go up to the counter and see its philosophy. This is the wrong carb, I need to return it. I'm sorry, Phil, I thought you said they were all the same. He turns beet red again and just says he wants to return it. I look at the packaging. It's torn open and there is dirt all over it, but most importantly it reeks of old gas. Why he would connect the fuel line to a carb that won't fit is beyond me. I'm sorry, I can't accept this, it has fuel in it, I explained this when you purchased it. We go back and forth for a while and he eventually accepts defeat and just asks to buy the correct carb. I ask for the model and serial number and he still doesn't have it. He has to go and get it, he come back with the correct numbers, we sell him the correct carb. Wife not eligible for a replacement phone for another year. Okay, but I am. When I was married, we were always on a tight budget. It got a lot tighter as my late ex was a bit of a klutz. She put my mother-in-law's parrot in cage on top of the TV, and the parrot knocked over its water tray, shorting out the TV. This was at a time when having TVs repaired was worth it. Ching out of my pocket. I'm out of town on an assignment, gone less than a week into a 5-month job assignment, and she breaks her glasses by sitting on them. Normal replacement, $100. She went to one of those 1-hour places. Yeah, that was her specialty. The one that falls under malicious compliance had to do with her cell phone. She always had a glass of ice water handy and sipped it throughout the day. Suddenly, the ringer stopped working. She'd only had it for about 4 months, so we took it back to the store. Clerk looked at it and said that the phone had gotten wet, which was not covered under the warranty. The condensation of her glass of ice water did it in. Because of her health conditions, she had to have a phone close by at all times. We were looking over replacements, and they didn't have anything for under $100, and we'd have to pay cash for it. Cue malicious compliance. While I never worked in a cell phone store, I had worked in telecommunications customer service for over 6 years. I knew there had to be a way around it. Then I remembered my last statement and that it said I was eligible for an upgrade. Okay, I can't swing a new phone for her, but if I take my upgrade, which would move me to a cheap, smartphone, could we take my old flip phone and change it to her account? The guy looked at me confused at first. He'd been trying to make a sale. Upgrades were a better sale for him than a replacement, apparently, and he was also trying to help us out. After a moment of thought, calling the store manager over, he said that's the ticket. I got my smartphone for a penny that time. They added it to my next bill. LOL, and reprogrammed my phone for my wife to use. I'm glad I was there. Wife normally would turn all Karen, but since she let me do the talking, she got what she needed. I got an upgrade, and the CSR got closer to his monthly quota. Or, as my old AT&T boss used to say, always try to find a win/win situation. If you made it to the end of the video, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe and share, and we will see you in the next video.